Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready to hit rewind on gaming history?
Always.
Today we're going back to 1984.
Oh, wow. 84. Okay.
To a little game called H.E.R.O. that I feel like maybe doesn't get enough credit for how ahead of its time it was.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, this is a time when most platformers were all about, like, ladders and dodging barrels.
Right. Very rigid.
And H.E.R.O. was like, hold my joystick. Because instead of those rigid movements, it let players fly, well, sort of, with a jetpack.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you could go up, down, left, right, 360 degrees of movement. I kind of think of it like the developers looked at Donkey Kong and were like, what if Mario could just fly over those barrels?
That's a great way to put it. And you're right. It was so innovative for its time. I mean, think about how that free movement mechanic paved the way for games we know and love today. You've got the grappling hook and Bionic Commando, all that vertical freedom.
Oh, totally.
Or even something like Bangai-O with, like, the free-flying craziness of it all. H.E.R.O. kind of planted those seeds.
Yeah, it really is like a sneak peek behind the curtain of gaming history. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
You're right.
let's go back to the beginning. So, H.E.R.O., which stands for Helicopter Equipped Rescue Operation, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Very cool.
It was the brainchild of John Van Ryzin,
Okay.
who was a developer who got his start on the Apple II.
And this is, what, early 80s, right?
Yeah.
So back then, the development scene was a totally different world.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, Van Ryzin had all this creative freedom at Activision, no tight deadlines, no restrictive budgets, like the polar opposite of how it is today.
Oh, absolutely. It was the Wild West of gaming. And speaking of wild, you're not going to believe where Van Ryzin got the inspiration for the game.
Okay, let's hear it.
A cave exploration trip.
What? No way.
Yeah, he went exploring caves one weekend, and that sparked the whole cavern setting for H.E.R.O.
That's amazing.
Right. And then you add in his childhood love of superheroes, Superman, and that heat vision, and you can see how all these personal touches found their way into the game.
Totally. I love that.
But still, this is the early 80s we're talking about.
Yeah.
How did one person even begin to code something as intricate as H.E.R.O. with the tech back then?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Van Ryzin was a one-man show, coding every line, drawing every pickle, even creating every single sound effect, all by himself.
Wow.
And get this. He used a PDP-11 computer and this, like, cutting-edge debugging tool. This was way before massive dev teams and fancy game engines.
It's mind-blowing that he pulled off those scrolling levels, all those details, on the Atari 2600.
It's incredible. You've got to remember, this is the Atari 2600 we're talking about. So getting that smooth scrolling was a technical feat all on its own.
Totally. Okay, so that's the backstory, but what about the actual gameplay? Imagine yourself in the pilot's seat.
Okay, I'm there.
You're H.E.R.O., decked out in your little jumpsuit and that awesome helicopter backpack, and your mission is to rescue miners trapped in these dangerous, hazard-filled mine shafts.
And when you say hazard-filled, you mean it.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking spiders, snakes,
Right.
magma pits,
Yikes.
even these, like, rogue lanterns that could just plunge the whole screen into darkness.
Oh, wow, scary. So definitely not your average walk to the right and win kind of game.
No, not at all. H.E.R. demanded precision, strategy, and a whole lot of patience.
Yeah, I bet.
Like, you really couldn't just run and gun your way through those levels.
Right.
You had to master that jetpack, navigate all these tight spaces, avoid those crazy hazards.
It's making me sweat just thinking about it.
Right. And if things got too intense...
What then? You're surrounded by spiders. The magma's rising. What do you do?
Dynamite.
Of course. Every good 80s game needs dynamite.
Exactly. But in H.E.R.O., it wasn't just about blowing stuff up.
Oh. What else could you do with it?
Well, you could use it to clear paths, solve puzzles, or, you know, if you weren't careful, accidentally blow up H.E.R.O.
Oof. Better to have bad aim in the game than in real life, right?
Right. But, you know, it's funny, though, how that kind of unforgiving difficulty was, like, part of the appeal back then.
Totally. It made those victories feel that much better. Rescuing those miners, conquering a level, like, you really earned it.
There was a real sense of accomplishment, that's for sure. And, you know, it says a lot about the gaming culture at the time, too. Persistence and skill, those were badges of honor.
Sure.
Speaking of which, you know about the Order of the Hero.
Wait, what? Like a real-life award for being good at H.E.R.O.? Tell me more.
Okay, so if you were good enough at H.E.R.O., if you got a high enough score, you could send proof to Activision.
No way.
And they'd send you this special patch in the mail.
That is so cool. Can you imagine that today?
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I got a level 500 on Candy Crush. Send me my patch.
Right. Talk about a relic from a different era.
Totally. And speaking of things from that era, we can't talk about H.E.R.O without talking about Activision itself.
Yeah, good point.
Because this is the company founded by those, like, rebel ex-Atari developers,
Like
the
Atari.
ones who wanted more creative freedom and control over their games.
They were like rock stars, breaking the mold, doing their own thing.
I love that. So Activision's story really is like H.E.R.O's gameplay.
Yeah.
All about pushing boundaries, going against the grain.
100%, like classic underdog story, taking on the industry giants.
So you've got Activision pushing boundaries, you've got H.E.R.O pushing boundaries with its gameplay.
Right.
It's like H.E.R.O helped cement Activision's rep for being innovators and risk takers.
It definitely did, which makes it even more tragic that it was released during the video game crash of '84.
Oh man, talk about terrible timing. You've got this amazing game, a company on the rise, and then boom, the whole market crashes around them.
It really makes you wonder what could have been.
Totally. Like, imagine if H.E.R.O had come out just a year earlier. Would things have been different? Could it have changed everything?
Who knows, but I bet it's still debated today.
I bet so.
Yeah.
But even with the crash, even with the odds stacked against it, H.E.R.O still found a way.
Totally.
I mean, it got ported to other systems.
Yeah.
People were making unofficial versions of it decades later.
People loved it.
That really says something about a game when even a crash can't stop it.
It really shows you the power of a good idea. Those core mechanics, the freedom, the puzzles, that whole thrill of the rescue, it just clicked with people.
It really did. And speaking of clicking, we have to talk about John Van Ryzin's return to his roots. You mean with Alien Abduction. That's like the spiritual successor.
Exactly. It came out this year, took everything that made H.E.R.O great, that free movement, the dynamite puzzles, and gave it a fresh coat of paint for a new generation.
It worked. People liked it.
They loved it. Okay. Just goes to show that even decades later, those core mechanics still hold up.
That's so cool. It really is wild to think about how this one game from '84, during a really tumultuous time in gaming,
oh yeah, for sure,
managed to not only survive but thrive. Like, it inspired so many games that came after it. Who knew a little guy with a jetpack could have such a lasting impact?
It really highlights the power of a great idea.
Totally.
H.E.R.O dared to be different.
Yeah.
Dared to imagine a new kind of platformer. And it worked.
It really did. And it makes you appreciate those early developers even more.
Totally.
Working with what they had, limited tech, but still coming up with these incredibly creative and innovative ideas.
It's inspiring.
It really is. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of H.E.R.O, what's the biggest takeaway for you? What stands out?
For me, it's that sometimes the most influential games aren't the ones with all the hype or the fancy graphics. Sometimes it's these hidden gems, these quiet innovators that really shake things up.
That's such a great point.
And those are the games that can change gaming forever.
Totally. And who knows, maybe there's another H.E.R.O out there. Maybe there's another hidden gem just waiting to be rediscovered.
That's the beauty of it, right?
It really is. There's always something new to discover, even in those old 8-bit worlds.
100%.
Well, on that note, I think we're ready to power down our jetpacks for this deep dive into gaming history.
Time to recharge.
Exactly. Until next time, happy gaming, everyone.